Well, it's a pleasure to follow my right honourable friend for Staffordshire Moorlands and watch her whip the minister into submission even before he's given his speech. But I look forward to hear the minister's speech. He's a most effective minister. And I thought actually the point that she made, from a right-wing point of view, was very effective. My constituents in Lincolnshire are absolutely grinding their teeth at what is happening at the Channel, and they want the Home Office to be far more proactive, and this isn't the right place to say what the Home Office should do. But why are these people coming here? These are not nasty people. These are desperate people fleeing the most appalling war, poverty, deprivation. And the Channel is proving completely ineffective. You know, we held back in the Second World War the Nazi hordes with the RAF. You know, we stopped them, but we can't hold people coming back. We are one world. You know, if there is dire misery and poverty in the world, it will wash up on our shores. I'll give way to my right honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my right friend give away so early, but he says these comments about Dover are not applicable to this debate. I would argue they absolutely are. It's the fact that we don't explain ourselves to the British people how this money can be spent that does affect them directly. If we did that, we'd have more support to say let's confirm our 0.7% rather than it being having old-fashioned views of where this money has been spent. And I agree, some of it bad in the past. So he's absolutely right to focus on this, because wise DFID money spent correctly will be supported by the British people.
And I'm sure that's right. And all right, I'm going to accept now that if you had an opinion poll in the Gainsborough constituency, a majority, perhaps even a strong majority, would be in favour of these cuts. I accept that. But if the government for a moment explained what this money was spent on, the British people are kind and humanitarian. Now, people often say to me in Lincolnshire, you know, why are we giving money to India? You know, they have aircraft carriers, they have a space program. Well, leaving aside the utter poverty of hundreds of millions of people in Uttar Pradesh, why are we living through this horrible lockdown? You know, why are we spying on ministers with cameras and having a complete moral void? Because of the Delta variant, which has come from where? India. So, whether it's the pandemic or migrants, you cannot insulate yourself for the world, and that's why we have an overseas aid programme. I'll give way to my
very grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way, and a point that I wanted to make, but I've run out of time despite the fact I had 3 minutes, was that actually for many people, and more than 3 minutes rather, for many people 0.5% is the wrong number as well. The amount of aid that they wish to be spent is zero. And actually the government, by going from 0.7 to 0.5, isn't really achieving anything in terms of popularity.
Well, that is precisely the point I wanted to make. And by the way, I'm proud of the work we did on the Public Accounts Committee to get an Estimates Day debate which actually discusses estimates. Because in the past, the one thing we weren't allowed to discuss before we had our successful campaign was you couldn't discuss estimates. Indeed, one of my colleagues, the then MP for Southport, stood up and tried to discuss estimates. He was ruled out of order by your predecessor, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So we are talking about money. And this is precisely the point I want to come to. Now, I could devote, I'm number 39 on the call list, I could devote my entire speech to the humanitarian arguments. And by the way, I've listened to these speeches and I associate them with myself entirely. I just cannot for a moment understand why we're cutting aid to Yemen by 50%. I mean, the scenes there were appalling. Now, the Chancellor very kindly paid me in the summer to go to Doddington Hall and have a very nice meal with my family and eat out to help out. Oh, was that money well spent? And then I look at what's happening in Yemen, and some poor boy goes out and his leg is blown off. Or the father goes out and he's never seen again. This is dire poverty, war, deprivation. Now, leaving aside whether this problem washes up on our shores or not, do we not have a duty to these people? And I so much remember talking to a woman in northern Iraq, and this had happened precisely to her. One day her husband had gone out and he was never seen again. So, of course, we have very serious problems in Lincolnshire. But compared to what's happening in Yemen, we just can't turn our back. We can't walk down the other side of the road. Yeah, I give way to my right honourable friend.
I'm extremely grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way. He mentioned his own constituency, where, of course, he has been and is much loved for many, many years. And he says that he thinks that his advocacy may or may not convince his constituents. I have to tell him, he is the last Thatcherite, or possibly one of two left in this House, a point that the House will award him. And I have to tell him that what he says in his constituency on this matter, and what he says to the front bench on this matter, it is having a very significant effect.
Well, he's very kind. I suppose being the last Thatcherite is better than being the last Majorite, but...
Heathite.
Actually, funnily enough, opinion is changing. If you look at the latest opinion polls, it's changing because people are waking up to the fact that actually in the middle of a global pandemic, it's probably not a very good time to cut aid. Because all these problems are now coming back to bite us. Now, of course, yeah.
I thank the Right Honourable Member for giving way. Just on the point he makes on Yemen, doesn't the UK have a special responsibility when it comes to Yemen as a permanent member of the Security Council, but also one of the largest suppliers of weapons to Saudi Arabia, which has a big role to play in the Yemen conflict?
Have a role. And I fully accept the point about the Commonwealth. I mean, we've heard that we should prioritise the Commonwealth, but as we've also heard, where are these cuts falling on the Commonwealth? But we can't just direct our aid to the Commonwealth, we have to direct our aid where it's most needed. Now, on this Thatcherite point, and this is not a humanitarian point, because many people have made the humanitarian point, which I associate myself with. I remember in my first Parliament listening to Enoch Powell, and he sat over there, and in fact my first rebellion was to force the government to have postal ballots in the workplace and trade unions while the minister defended workplace ballots. We'll leave it on one side, and I was supported by Enoch Powell. Now, what would Enoch Powell say about that? He wouldn't have liked this 0.7%. But he would have said it's quite ridiculous to have an arbitrary limit of 0.7%, to reduce it to another arbitrary limit of 0.5%, which is no more popular or less popular than the 0.7%, and then to promise we're going to increase it back to 0.7%. It is, as he would have said, and I can't do the Birmingham accent, unlike my right honourable friend, it is a logical absurdity. It is a nonsense built on stilts. It makes no sense that all these civil servants, in the middle of a global pandemic, are running around cutting all these programmes, and then next year, if we believe the government, and of course the government would never tell an untruth to the House, would it? So this is only a temporary cut. All these programmes, after this pandemic, are going to be restored. So, well, the Minister is shaking his head. So are they not going to be restored?
Return to 0.7%, and we will do that in the most effective way. I would hope to build back better.
Well, that is that when we ask, what does temporary mean? Surely temporary only means temporary. Now, being helpful, I want to give a way out for the government. We've got the budget coming up. Why it's before the end of the year? Why can't the Chancellor of the Exchequer actually address this issue and explain how he's going to restore the 0.7%? Now, we do live in a parliamentary democracy. I leave aside the point about the manifesto. I know circumstances change. I know we are strapped for cash, but I follow the point that this is a relatively small amount of the total budget. But I do think, to answer the Minister has now confirmed that we are going to return to 0.7%. Now, one way out, surely, would be, and this, I'm trying to help the Prime Minister here, when it comes to vaccines or tropical medicines, where there is a real problem, he could, week by week or month by month, release more money for a particular programme, in addition to the 0.5%. He would get enormous public credit, there would be good publicity for him, and gradually we could restore this cut. And then the Chancellor of the Exchequer, in the budget, could announce that we have now come out of the pandemic, the country is fully vaccinated, the economy is growing very well again, and then I can now increase it back to 0.7%. Or he could do the honest thing. If that's not his view, he could say that I believe this 0.7% in a year is arbitrary. I think it should be phased in over 3 years, or I believe that we should preserve it in real terms. He can make any argument he wants, and we will listen to it, and then we should have a vote on it. We should have a vote on it, and we should either approve what he suggests, or we should deny him. What is completely unacceptable, surely, in a parliamentary democracy is to make a manifesto commitment, to say it's temporary, but to avoid any vote, to prevaricate, just because you think you might lose the vote. And worse, just because you think it's popular. Is it so popular, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Is it the right thing to do, or should we not do the right thing?